In October 2024, we gathered at the PASI Legislative Summit to tackle a profound and troubling question. Why do our judicial systems seemingly disregard the Constitution, leading to the fracturing of families? The issue of parental alienation has evolved into a silent epidemic, often manipulating as a powerful weapon during divorce disputes. This manipulation not only harms the relationships between parents and their children, but also inflicts emotional and psychological turmoil on the children themselves. As policymakers engage in lengthy discussions about shared parenting arrangements, child support formulas, and custody regulations, the true victims, our children, are often left on the sidelines. They face the emotional fallout of these contentious debates while their lives are dissected as if they were mere bargaining chips in legal negotiations. It is imperative that we come together as a community to advocate for the meaningful change in our family courts. We must unite to ensure that the voices of children are prioritized, fostering environments where they can thrive rather than endure the negative ramifications of adult conflicts. Their well-being should always take precedence, driving us to demand legal reforms that uphold their rights, dignity, and emotional health. Only by standing together can we hope to create a future where children are shielded from unnecessary strife and their best interests at the forefront of every decision made.
I ran up to give an introduction to the woman who needs no introduction. Our hostess, Joan Kloth-Zanard, serves Parental Alienation Consortium as director. She has a master's in marriage and family therapy and is an expert and consultant in custodial interference, parental alienation, as well as interventions, techniques, and strategies for moving forward and rebuilding a life after trauma. She has worked with families and on domestic violence issues for 35 years, with 25 specializing in psychological abuse and trauma caused by custodial interference and parental alienation. She founded PAS Intervention after her own family became victims from the criminal act of custodial interference. She presently runs 2 nonprofits relating to her work with psychological abuse. She is the author of 2 books, Where Did I Go Wrong? How Did I Miss the Signs? Dealing with hostile, aggressive parenting and parental alienation. That's one book. The second one is dealing with hostile, aggressive parenting and parental alienation. Or no, is that one?
That's one.
That's one. Okay, it's got a long title. The second book is The Broken Family Bonds, Poems and Stories by Victims of Parental Alienation. Please welcome our hostess, Joan Kloth-Zanard.
Carolyn, you walked out the door, but thank you for the segue in. I am actually presenting something that Don Hubin and Liana Maika, I think is her name, put together for ICSP, which is the International Council on Shared Parenting. So what is shared parenting? Equal shared parenting refers to an arrangement in which parents living apart both retain decision-making responsibility. I'm going to read literally right from here. With respect to the children, legal custody, they call it, joint custody. And the children enjoy substantial equal time in the care of each parent, substantially equal shared physical custody, obviously. Not all states, while we have this as a presumption in some states, it's not a given in all states. While our Constitution actually says we are supposed to have that, it doesn't seem to trickle down all the way. Research spanning the past 40 years provides compelling evidence that when parents live apart, children's well-being is best promoted by an arrangement of equal shared parenting. This is important. We got statistics that say this is the facts. This is really important that kids have access to both parents equally. The NPO organization's goal is to make shared parenting the norm by reforming the family law courts and laws in every state and educating divorce professionals and parents about the benefits for children of equal shared parenting. Well, yes, this is super important. And one of the things the NPO is doing in coordination with ICSP is to make sure they're going from state to state to get this presumed shared parenting on those and policies on the record in the legislation clearly defined. This is important. We need to clearly define this, which is one of the legislations we will be working on. I have, in fact, the group working with the shared parenting legislation will have a lot of documents that you'll be able to go through and merge and take what you need to make everything that we need into one template. Elements of a strong shared parenting bill. A strong shared parenting bill will have the following features. Rebuttal of presumption. What's that mean? It means to create a legal presumption that's rebuttable by, obviously, if there's an issue, that joint legal custody and substantially equal physical custody is in the child's best interest when parents divorce. Intact family rule. Just because you are getting divorced doesn't mean the parents don't exist anymore. All orders apply to both temporary and permanent orders. So these are the words that they're using to put into their shared parenting legislation. Explain deviations. Require courts, when they deviate from this presumption, to explain with clear language. So specifically, the grounds upon which they are deviating. Be specific. Specific grounds for appropriate deviation from the presumption, including findings of abuse, neglect, or domestic violence. This makes sense. We need to make sure that's clearly in our shared parenting bills because it prevents the opposition from doing what? Oh, you can't have shared parenting because you have abuse. But when you have a statistic of 90% of abuse allegations being false, this is a big problem. It's chewing up all the resources that we need for the true victims of abuse. Appropriate remedies. Provide a family court-based remedy for false allegations of abuse and neglect. This is another piece of legislation that we will be having a committee working on, which includes that time take back with Robert Garza. Data keeping. Require courts to maintain data indicating for each divorce with children what percentage of time or how many overnights the children are with each parent, and to publish compiled and analyze data annually. In other words, we need to make sure that when the courts are making these orders, when we are, watching these families, that there's some kind of statistical tracking to show what's going on. A strong equal shared parenting bill will have the following features. As we just said, the rebuttable legal presumption. Everything should apply to both temporary and permanent orders. Require courts, when they deviate, to be clear on why they are deviating. The deviations are based solely on abuse, neglect, and domestic violence. Not on because, daddy didn't pay the child support, or mommy forgot to feed the kids scrambled eggs and gave them fried eggs. And then we have the last two of a remedy, which we've talked about, examples like 3 strikes, you're out, some of the things that Tina Mayer has talked about. There are many ways we can remedy this, but the important part is that there has to be penalties, because without these bloody penalties, we've got nothing. And there needs to be penalties for false allegations, because if you make an allegation and you get away with it and it's bad girl, here's a new court order. Bad girl, we're not getting anywhere. They know they can keep doing it. It's like the kid who takes the cookie from the cookie jar and doesn't get their hand slapped because it's just before dinner. The kid thinks, I can take a cookie anytime I want to. Hence the cookie monster in my husband's cookie drawer. Last one, this requiring of the data being maintained and having a really good database of information for statistical research, so that we can show and the courts can see, yes, this program worked. No, this program didn't. Yes, this method worked. No, maybe this method didn't work. Whatever it is that statistical data is going to give us. And that be the end of my PowerPoint. Does anybody have any questions about shared parenting that go ahead. Hi, Dave.
Is there any standard of proof that you would suggest be included in the language of a bill?
Say that again to me.
In legal vernacular, there's preponderance of evidence, there's.
Due process rights.
So you suggest there be specific language about the standard of proof the court must find?
Okay, so the question in the audience from Dade is, should there be a standard for abuse and neglect and the filing of basically of these charges and making sure the due process rights are not being destroyed? Your due process rights fall under the 5th and the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Yes, there probably should be. And that could be something we work into the legislations we're working on, or it could be a completely different one. Realize we do have 3 major and at least 5 minor that types of legislation or resolutions that we can work on. So you understand, there are 3 types of bills that can get passed. You can do a resolution, excuse me. You can do a policy change, and you can do an actual constitutional bill. You guys will be able to, maybe you can do it. Your templates could fall under all 3, could be 3 different ones. But this is what we want to do, is build these templates so that we walk away here. I could send this to Ireland, and even though it's in United States format, they can look at all our parameters. They can look at all the things we put in and say, we can add that to ours, and they can literally take from our work, add to theirs in another country if they want. We want this universal. Yes, go ahead, John.
I don't have the answer.
Oh, you want us to have them? He'll repeat to me. I'll repeat it.
First thing is abuse. We haven't defined abuse clearly. And let me make a point of order so that you understand.
Oh, well, I realize, John, I need to repeat what you're saying to the audience here. So, John, unless you want to come up and talk, which is a little, I know it's a little more difficult to walk up right now. Basically, he's talking about, we don't have defined parameters for what is abuse. That was question 1.
Okay, and to understand that the following men had divorces initiated against them alleging abuse, so that you understand how abuse is misused. And I'm going to go down the list very quickly, and you don't have to repeat for the audience.
John, I'm going to stop you because we're not doing any gender issues. This is not just to men. What you're about to tell me, I have seen with women. So take the men out. Tell me the point
is what constitutes abuse? Is it abuse of the spouse or abuse of the child?
both. Abuse can fall under either. Abuse can be physical, sexual, psychological. It can be financial. We're
Point is if we're looking at custody issues, why is abuse of the spouse an issue when you're dealing with custody of the child?
Because a parent they have a rightful concern that if we have a parent convicted, I am not talking about accused. Accused does not quantify because, as I've said, 90% of the domestic violence allegations are false. There must be a conviction. That is, domestic violence is abuse.
Right. Okay. Because domestic violence is a misused category. To me, domestic violence is there's injury. Actual injury in the marriage.
No, domestic violence includes financial abuse, where one parent controls all the money and the other parent only gets, you get $50 for the week. You only get $50 for groceries. That's financial abuse. That is a form of domestic violence. Domestic violence includes coercive control. It includes physical harm. It includes sexual harm. That's domestic violence. Coercive control is a recent bill that is being passed in many states and is in Connecticut. It's where somebody uses the power of suggestion, or as Julie will call it, luring, L-U-R-I-N-G, which is a law that you cannot lure somebody into something. It's when you influence somebody in a way that is harmful, dangerous, or otherwise could cause a relationship issue or convinces them to join a cult of some kind.
concern there is, and now we've defined that issue, what is the defense of a person who's falsely accused when we're talking about something like coercive control, when it's all subjective?
It's not subjective that here's the deal. You can prove coercive control if you have been documenting. It is why I teach people how to properly document so you can show a pattern of behavior. Before you got separated, you had a loving, healthy relationship. All of a sudden, you're served with divorce papers. All of a sudden, the children hate you. Why? Because they've been coercively controlled and told that you're a horrible, terrible parent who beat the mother, whatever. Or you're a horrible, terrible father, you're a horrible, terrible, whatever. You're a horrible, terrible mother because you took all the money and you're getting all the child support. I can't tell you the list. Or you're a horrible, terrible parent because you don't know how to make scrambled eggs. It can be as frivolous as that. If you're documenting, you're going to show there's a pattern of behavior going on that is growing in severity, and that it's not coming from your behavior necessarily. It's coming from behavior patterns that are being instigated by the other parent. Go ahead, Charity, and then I have Allison who has a question.
So, there's so much focus and emphasis on abuse, child abuse, but the courts don't recognize the psychological abuse that's happening to the child when they're torn apart from a loving parent. So what is our position on that?
Actually, some of the courts are starting to get it. If you get in front of the right judges, do not use the word parental alienation. Describe the elephant in the room. Let the experts call it a pachyderm. Pachyderm's a scientific term for an elephant. We don't care what they call it. We don't care if they call it my big left toe. All we want to know is that they understand that there's a pattern of behavior here that is causing a problem with the family dynamic between the children and one of the parents. So when you talk psychological, yes, some of that, they're realizing this. This is very new concept. Remember, your judges are not mental health professionals. We literally are going to have to train them. Philip, I, and Lynn Steinberg have a training program. We've actually, 6, 7 parts? I can't even remember anymore, that we've been working on and stopped for a while, that was specific to train the judges, to teach them a lot of this. It has a little mental health, not a lot, because it goes too far over the head. We have another version that'll be for mental health professionals.
Follow-up to that is, John's point is, when there's 90% of false allegations that are unfounded, are we reviewing from a legal perspective the psychological impact that has on those children that are forced to align?
We should be, but it is very hard to get researchers to take on some of these projects. And that's because they've got to get the grants and funding. I do believe there's been a couple domestic violence research projects done. I don't know how far they delve into each of the areas. Charity, I would say, see if you can find us information. John, I have Allison first.
Why is it that the allegation of domestic violence or abuse is not presumptively denied?
Because you can't do that, because there are abusers out there. And what's happened is,
There are abusers out there.
John, this is why. You have Judge Emmons, who did not listen. The parent told Judge, they're threatening to kill me. No, they're not going to do that. Goes to the home, bada boom, boom. Kills both the parent and the in-law. Another one. Parent says, the other parent's threatening to jump off the bridge with the kid. No, he's not going to do that. Damn if the person didn't jump off the bridge with the child. It's the baby Aiden case. Died.
Definitive evidence and testimony. I'm saying the burden of the proof should be on the person making the allegation and not on the person of the allegation.
No, you don't. That's the problem. Right. It's hard. Yes, I agree with John. John, I agree with you that if you're going to make an allegation of violence, whether it be physical, sexual, or psychological, you better have solid, verifiable evidence to back it up. But I'm also going to tell you there's parents out there who will manufacture evidence. Parent A, every time the children come home from daddy's house, she puts them in the bathroom and scrubs their private parts till they're red and raw, then takes a picture. Manufactured evidence, gives it to the courts, gives it to CPS. Dad gets locked up during that year. Mom goes and starts talking to a friend during lunch. Hey, you know how I got my ex-husband thrown in jail? Blah, blah, blah. Thank God this person had ethics and values. They went back to the father and who went back to the attorney. Dad was taken out, was removed from jail, and mother was charged with sexual abuse of the children. So this is why I tell parents, you better have solid, verifiable, irrefutable evidence if you're going to make a charge, because it isn't fair to the parents who are seriously being abused, and all these resources are being wasted on false allegations instead of directing it to the victims that really need it. Allison, go ahead.
Thanks, Joan. So again, with tomorrow's legislation, is it going to be focused mostly on cases of shared parenting and not address the percentage of parents who are dealing with the abuse, with protecting for the parents?
8 different pieces, Allison, we have 8 different pieces of legislation we can work on. There are 3 major. Shared parenting, custodial, they're in the program. It lists it in the program. Please open your program. You'll find it there. So we're great. We have 3 major, and I think there's 5 or 6 minor. Now, some of those minors may be able to be pulled in under some of the other legislations. Okay. Shared parenting probably has the most information, in part because the MPO has been pushing it. So we've got various bills that have been passed in various states. Some states have shared parenting, but their bill is not complete. This is where you would go in with what Julie had said, and you'd say to your legislator, look, I think we need to add this to our shared parenting bill. These are important things to ensure that the shared parenting is working the way it should be working.
Okay, and I just wanted to add one other thing to the person who was commenting about abuse with children versus domestic abuse. I hate the word domestic abuse, because coercive controller is a lot better in terms of they try to control everyone in their environment. So whether it's in your home and a child actually watching their other parent being abused, it's role modeling that negative behavior, and they pick up on that and become an abusive child if they're not getting the right help. So you can't separate out that abuse is only specifically towards the parent when it is influencing the children. So just wanted to put that out there.
So more to Allison's thing that might make it a little, if you look at parental alienation, if you look at custodial interference and coercive control, it is a form of a cult. The person is inculcating, Lena Gottlieb word, inculcating the children into a cult of anger, fear, hatred, and rage at the other parent. Think of the Moonies, Jim Jones, or Waco, any of these religious cults. They convince their people to obviously, oh no, you can't associate with the outside world. We're the only ones who can protect you. Philip.
Extension of the psychological concept of folia doom, shared delusion.
Hey, I don't know if you guys could hear that on the Zoom. Philip said it's a extension of folia do, which is an extension of where you share your issues. It's a projection almost of your issues to the children. In fact, this is one of the biggest issues. Your alienators were abused as children. Nobody saved them. They are projecting their issues through the children onto the other parent in an attempt to save little them. It's the most basic way I can boil it down for you. So when we're working with a cluster B, a narcissist, or a very difficult parent to co-parent, step back, say, hey, if I was at my job and I'm working with this person, how am I going to work with them? How am I going to manage a normal business relationship? This may have to be viewed as a business relationship. Okay. There are many ways we can restructure how you communicate and coordinate and co-parent. Brian, go ahead.
Basic legislation and what we're gonna be working on starting tomorrow. So on page 7 of this, everybody has is those 3 categories that Joan just mentioned. I'm gonna work on a team that will be the top one, which is the child abuse. PA is child abuse and IBV. I'd love to talk to anyone who wants to be part of that group at like dinner tonight. And the other 2 are probably even more popular: false allegations of abuse and or neglect. And then the third one is shared parenting. Okay, so it's just a little lead in.
Thank you very much, Brian. And then, like I said, we've got 5 others. We went to try and use the whiteboard. Apparently, even my brand new set of wipe erasers don't seem to work. So, Katie will put some stuff together. There is folders. So what's going to kind of happen, and Larry we were going to explain this tomorrow, but just to put you at ease, guys all have access. Most of you have computers here. We'll pull up the Google Drive. You'll be able to go into the legislative folder. You'll be able to see the proposed different legislations. You'll be able to open that folder and see the information that's in there. If you guys, right now, I have it set that you guys can actually go in there and upload if you had a document. So if some of you have a document for your specific state that you feel is something that could be added to, just tell us you're doing this, but you got to put it in the right folder, so we're not struggling. Or send it to me, tell me which folder, which proposal or legislation you feel it belongs in, and I'll drop it in, okay? But you'll be able to take those. I think the AI idea by Larry is going to be tremendously helpful to merge all of this data in for us, okay? Go ahead, yes.
False allegations, and they're having to give penalty, with the whole hand in the cookie jar thing, right? And that makes sense when you've got like the pathological parent, I guess what we call them, who is making the accusation. But what happens when the child is making that false accusation? You can't penalize the child, right? So they're being used as a weapon against the other parent. What's your recommendation on how to deal with prevention of that?
First of all, that child should have been interviewed by a proper mental health specialist. I love the one where they want to commit suicide, and Tina Mayer's favorite thing is, so you want to commit suicide. Do you understand that if you do that, you can't pet your dog again, you can't see your mommy, you can't see your daddy, you can't see your friends, you can't go play baseball. Oh, no more ice cream. Oh, no, that's not what I mean. I'm just angry. And that's what Tina gets, because they don't understand the concept. So the idea with the domestic violence is there are ways the proper mental health therapist who's doing a proper evaluation. Right, but that's where the education is going to have to come in. It should be a requirement. That is why GAL should not be attorneys unless they are doing mental health training, because they can't recognize it. And that is why true abuse cases are slipping through the cracks. Not because there aren't there, it's because of all the improperly trained, the excessive allegations, which eats up all the time, the money, the resources. This is why when we break into groups, you guys, some of you are going to have to play devil's advocate. And you're going to have to say, well, if I'm on the other side, what about that piece of part of the legislation don't I like? What's wrong with it? We may have to rephrase it so it's palatable to all.
So you have a custody evaluation that calls all this out, right? And then you go to a safe haven counselor and she doesn't believe what the other doctor brought forward, and she tells your daughter to scratch her wrist and say she's going to commit suicide to stop the custody evaluation.
First of all, that person shouldn't even be working. Safe haven, I'm going to tell you right now, we have it here in Connecticut. It's in my town of Southbury. Unfortunately, They are mother-specific oriented. They do not help. They shouldn't even be in existence as far as I'm concerned. If you're going to have a domestic violence agency, you cannot pick what gender you're going to choose over another. I'm sorry. I think Colorado is the only state that has a men's domestic violence, and it was started because of the gay lesbian movement.
There's such an under-focus on that. And domestic violence, and talk about it all.
Yeah, and you know what? This is another piece that's very important. There is a high preponderance of domestic violence in the lesbian gay communities. And it's completely.
Much higher than in general population.
Thank you, Philip. Much higher than in general population, because there is no monitoring, because they are seen as a stigma, because they are not readily accepted. While that is changing, not changing fast enough. Unfortunately, I've been doing this work for over 35 years. My first client was one of my best friends that I've known for 8 years. She went through it. We had no internet. There was no way to look this up. There was no way to know that there was a name for this. 10 years later, we have the internet. I can go out there. My husband's now going through this. And I'm going, oh, and I put in my search term, up pops Dr. Gardner. I knew Dr. Gardner personally. I knew Dr. Gardner since I was 5 years old. Not only was he my therapist, but I went to school with his kids. My best friends all hung out at his house. So when they start screaming he's a pedophile, whoa, stop. You don't know him. So 25 years ago, now I got a name. Now I got a face. It was Dr. Gardner who pushed me to make sure we had more peer review articles done. And that was very important. And that's kind of how we've gotten to these thousands of peer review articles, 35 years of research and education and stuff. It's just taking time. Does somebody remember the statistic on how long it took to get Down syndrome in the DSM? So it was decades. Decades. Okay, and we all know Down syndrome is a legitimate syndrome.
That's not the only example.
Right. That was the first one. Go ahead, Lisa. Just so the Zoom people understand the joke, Lisa has mentioned about how hysteria was in the DSM and applied to women. It was from the 1800s, and they believed if a woman got hysterical that they were unstable and mentally ill, and yeah. Right, and as Tina's saying, orgasms cured it. And Philip's answer is, oh, that's not real? Okay, so you can laugh because some of this is really that absurd. We're in the 21st, 22nd, whatever century you want to call this. And some of these archaic things still exist. We're here to make sure that doesn't continue, and we're going to make that as a change. I'm checking time, folks. Go ahead, Tina. To bring it into perspective, I would prefer a child to get punched in the face because then I can identify it. Psychological, coercive control are not quantifiable as easily. Follow the pattern behavior. It takes a hot minute to figure out what's really going on. And it does take time.
What we do need, what we can address.
As allegations, what we can address.
60 days to investigate. They don't need within 60 days.
They're saying 60 days. We don't need 60 days. You can figure it out within 2 to 3 days. And they decide to take all that time anyway.
Shorten the time, get more eyeballs on it.
Shorten the time, more eyeballs on it. Early intervention.
And that way they're.
That way.
Few and far between, and if they.
Few and far in
make
between.
False allegations and.
Making false allegations.
allegations.
And you get to number 3. They need to start holding the person accountable.
You can't just
How do we look at this? We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have to be careful. And to that, you're right, that we need, this is what I tell parents. If you've made an allegation of abuse and it's unsubstantiated, don't go making another allegation because you look bad. You better have solid, verifiable evidence that there is true abuse going on. And it needs to now be reported by a mandated reporter if possible. Go ahead, Philip. Recall also, Dr. Gardner said that psychological abuse as defined.
Over tens of thousands of cases.
Defined over tens of thousands of cases.
Considered that much worse.
Much worse.
Severe, if you will.
Much more severe and long-term lasting than physical abuse, sexual abuse. That
cannot be understated.
That cannot be understood because the reality is a person can say, I have a bruise. I know where that is from. My hurts. I know what this is. The psychological is internal. How they don't know how to address, they don't have the emotional skills, the executive functioning skills to pull it out.
Remains on the physical.
And and everything is being focused on the physical. We need to get better education and you need to do your job really documenting it. Go ahead, Larry.
But I want to make a point as a workers' compensation attorney, mental injury legislature and the case law wrote out of the law mental injury unless it then manifests itself as a physical injury. And no one can get compensation without an expert witness testifying, which is about $3,000, which is kind of similar in family court. And when you think that 90% of parents can't even afford a expert witness, let alone an attorney, to be able to have an advocate in court, think of this when we draft legislation, because that's the problem here. Because law likes the broken bones that they can see, put an x-ray, there's the broken bone. But we can't do that with psychological injury. So that's something that I think needs to be addressed moving forward tomorrow and Monday morning.
Yes, I think one of the ways you can recognize psychological injury is if you really truly have a kid who's threatening suicide. If you have a kid who's gone from being a straight A student to flunking, or a kid who went from being a semi-good student, all of a sudden they're overachieving in school. These are indicators, but our mental health and our courts are not recognizing those are indicators. Children who are isolated, have no friends, no after-school activities. The parent will dictate who they can be friends with. These are all indicators. Go ahead, Dana.
The parent and now suddenly doesn't want to see that.
Right, that's another right. Dana's indicator, and this is for those on the Zoom, is that the child loved this parent, did everything with this parent. Now all of a sudden they won't even go near them. That's a huge, huge indicator. That's actually one of the top 4 of the 5 factors. And behavioral manifestations.
The counterintuitive part of it from the legislation and the judicial perspective is with the education that you're
Why don't you
talking about.
come say it so I don't have to repeat. Charity, go for it.
So the question I have is for the legislation and the judicial part of it, that was a really great point that the kids all of a sudden have a disconnected, fearful relationship with a formerly loving parent in as little as 3 to 5 days, 24 to 48 hours, right? How do we help the judges understand that that's not even possible? Even children who have been abused have a desire to still be part of that parent's life. That's a big educational piece with the judicial system as well.